All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 6, 2023 meeting of the Arizona State Board of Pharmacy Complaint Committee. The time is 1 o'clock, and I will call this meeting to order. Dr. Gandhi, can you take roll call and conflicts of interest, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Ms. Walmsley?
Present. I've
Ms.
submitted my conflicts of interest for the record in writing.
Awesome, thank you. Ms. Nair?
I am here. I have a recusal on 4Q number 22-0342.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nair. Ms. Davis?
President, I had submitted a question to Ms. Galvin about a recusal question, but I don't have anything else at this time other than that.
Thank you. And Mr. Thorwald?
You're muted.
I'm here, no conflicts.
Thank you, Mr. Thorwald. All right, Madam Chair, we have a quorum and ready to go.
Awesome. Let's jump into the agenda. First up is item 4A, complaint number 23-0038. Licensee failed to report criminal charges within 10 working days and pled guilty to a class 6 undesignated offense. Thoughts or suggestions on this one?
Wouldn't this just be the standard $250 civil penalty for failure to disclose?
I was thinking maybe we might want to hear more, maybe a conference on this.
My personal thought is I could go either way. The thing that made it kind of stand out to me, Ms. Davis, just for your knowledge, was the fact that this was the undesignated classics offense was for fraud to obtain unemployment. So based on the fact that it's fraud, it concerns me a little bit, since licensees have access to, you know, private and health information, sensitive information, those kinds of things. So I could go either way. I saw both sides of it, so certainly open to more discussion there.
For exactly the reason you just said, I just kind of want to hear the story personally. I would recommend a conference.
Mr. Thorwald, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I'm just re-looking at everything. I had looked at this last night, and I have mixed feelings about it. Since I have mixed feelings, I default for a conference as well.
Okay, I'll make that my motion, is for a conference.
Do I have a second?
Member Thorwald, I seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Moving on, item 4B, complaint number 22-0668. A pharmacy was allegedly compounding a commercially available product. Thoughts or discussion on this one?
Yeah, I think that a conference would be appropriate for this. I also am wondering about a cease and desist order being sent out.
A cease and desist may be more appropriate once the matter is finally adjudicated, and a determination is made, you know, what had occurred and why was it occurring. You could ask staff to pursue maybe an interim agreement where they would stop compounding these allegedly commercially available products. But in order of like logical progression, a cease and desist may come at the end of the adjudication.
Remind me if I'm correct, but I think we have a conference, or we had a conference and it was postponed at the last meeting for the same issue with the same pharmacy, but it was a different complaint, or am I getting my wires crossed?
Lori, I think that you're correct. I think from the way I remember understanding it is that the board decided to postpone it because we were waiting for more information from the FDA.
which I think we got in here. And the way that I look at it, it looks like the compounding is appropriate. However, it's only appropriate under shortage circumstances. And there looks like there is potentially some time when this pharmacy was compounding when the ingredients weren't in shortage.
Also, I thought that the salt formulation was not authorized.
That is correct, Ms. Foxley. The salt version is not an API, the approved API by the FDA. It's the base version that they have to use. And you can only get the base version from certain sources. But we have a letter from the FDA that says the salt should not be used to compound.
So I have a question. Why, since they are using something that they shouldn't be using, why is it that we cannot stop them at this point until we have our meeting? It just seems like they should cease production of those things.
I don't know if we have heard from them, from the respondent, whether we have all of the information. And the board can, and I forgive me, but with the recent statutory changes, were you given the authority to issue a cease and desist? I think that still comes from the full board.
It does. I think this is different. We have to prove that this practice was is not allowed. Obviously, if you're doing business without a permit in Arizona and stuff like that, that's a black and white situation where we do issue cease and desist, but we have to determine that there was a practice violation before we could do that. So this is a little bit different.
What I'm referring to is the one portion of that where the FDA approved product contains no sodium, that piece of it. I can understand waiting for the other portion, but you're producing something that has something that shouldn't be in it and it's not approved by the FDA. Why is that limited?
I think that would be a determination for the full boards to make.
I think this is a really complicated issue. And I agree that it should go before the full board, but I would be in favor of a conference.
I agree with that as well. I think that the public could also benefit from hearing the discussion as well, since this seems to be a pretty hot topic in pharmacy right now. I think there could be some educational value for the entire regulated public.
I would make that motion that we
There's no further discussion. Go ahead.
I make the motion that we bring this before the board.
For a conference.
Yes, sorry.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on, item 4C, complaint number 22-0023. A patient filed a complaint because she did not think her compounded medication had the proper strengths and the pharmacy listed the incorrect prescriber.
My initial thoughts on this one was that we should treat it kind of like we typically treat a misfill when it's the first, say first offense, not like a chronic misfill situation, and that we should have them do some CE and error prevention, which it looks like the pharmacist has already done.
I was thinking the same thing, so I would be in favor of that, and then allowing it to count what's already been completed, count towards the extra hours, as long as the staff deems it appropriate.
Agreed.
That seems like a reasonable thing.
So this is a non-disciplinary order for CE.
Yeah, the standard 3 hours of CE and error prevention would be my motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Ms. Davis, I'll give you the next one to take.
All right, so this is 23-0003. Board received a complaint that the patient wasn't able to pick up their prescription for an albuterol inhaler. The pharmacy was closed and had some IT issues, it sounds like, and the patient was eventually able to receive their inhaler. Did any of you guys have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think we should dismiss this. Their system was down.
I agree.
Don't think there's much they could have done, really.
That's
They did,
what I,
sounds like they learned from it though, as well. So
yeah,
I
they
say
put
dis-
some policies in place for a future computer downtime. So that's what I wrote down too, I recommended a dismissal.
yeah, I'll make that my motion.
Second,
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Aye.
All right, next up, item 4E, complaint number 23-0006. A homemade alcoholic beverage was consumed in the pharmacy. Note, this complaint is on the permit holder. The next complaint that we will discuss is regarding the technician that consumed the product. Thoughts?
I don't think it's our job to mitigate company policy, and they definitely have a company policy against drugs and alcohol in the workplace. And while it may not have been appropriate, I don't think taking a sip of a Christmas beverage constitutes anything unprofessional on behalf of the technician.
So
get-
what rule do we have to support this? That's what I'm wondering as well.
It says to be determined by the board because there's not
Right.
really a clear rule that has been broken.
And again, this one is on the permit holder, so the
Right.
pharmacy. The way that I looked at this, to your point, Ms. Davis, the pharmacy has policies and procedures. It was clearly violated. They addressed it, it looks like, as soon as they were made aware, terminated the individual, did a broad investigation. So my personal opinion is I don't know that I think that the pharmacy itself is at fault here. I think they did a good job in addressing the situation that occurred.
I
Agree.
think,
So I would be in favor of dismissal is where my head is.
I was thinking the same thing.
Me too.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we dismiss it.
Do I have
Second,
a second?
I'll
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye,
I,
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Complaint number 23-0032. A technician was violated for company's alcohol and drug-free workplace policy. So this is the technician that was involved in this complaint. This one, there is a possible violation, just to follow up with the last conversation around potential unethical or unprofessional conduct.
yeah,
Working under the influence of drugs or other alcohol, under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Probably not impaired with one sip, but I guess that is the potential violation here.
what would that come under, on the,
Unprofessional
the guideline for penalties and so forth. I've got that in front of me and I was just trying to figure out which one that would be.
I don't think we've ever had anything quite like this that I can think of. Kristen, is there anything like this that you can think of? I mean, we've had issues where people were impaired under substances and there was clear evidence of impairment. I don't think that
Right.
was the case here. Granted, they did consume alcohol while working. It seems like
was
there
it
was,
alleged, or I can't recall that she had,
what I think is
And-
kind of alleged to me is whether or not the individual truly knew that there was even alcohol in it, since it was a homemade beverage. It seemed like there was a lot of back and forth, he said, she said. So I don't even really know if the person knew they were consuming anything wrong. And once they drank it, if they tasted alcohol, it doesn't sound like they continue to do so.
Yeah,
Right.
from all accounts, it sounds like the person only took a small sip of it, whether or not they knew there was alcohol in the product before they did or not.
My
I-
question would, I'm sorry,
I was just gonna say, I think seems fairly clear to me that the person was not working under the influence of drugs or alcohol, like having a sip of something that they didn't or did not know contained it. I don't know. They've already been fired. I don't know if they need any more punishment from us.
my question would be, where did it come from? Did they bring it on in themselves?
It was
Somebody
brought by another employee.
It was a Christmas gift.
as a Christmas gift?
Yeah, there was another employee that supposedly made this homemade beverage and gave it to all the other employees
And this was the only person that took a sip
that we're aware of. Yeah.
that we're aware of. Is there anything with regard to somebody being allowed to bring an alcoholic beverage, whether it be a Christmas gift or otherwise, into the
There's a
pharmacy?
policy for the company. That's why she was fired.
Right, but I meant for the individual, not the company.
Oh. For the person who brought it in,
Mhm.
did they break the policy? Oh, I don't recall how the policy reads.
I don't think that there's anything that would, like, in law prohibit it. Obviously, would not be good practice, but I mean,
To me, I find it, I didn't even find it as a fireable offense. If a person sat there and drank an entire bottle or took something more than one sip, I would see it as a major problem. But I don't even see it as a fireable problem when you're taking one sip of something like that. That's a Christmas gift or a gift like that. But that's just my thought.
I think I would lean towards a letter of concern, just because I don't want it to come across as that we think this is okay. Even a small sip is not appropriate. Even I wouldn't say the person's impaired, just not appropriate.
Well, but at the same time, as Lori mentioned, they may or may not have even known that there was alcohol in there.
Yeah, it's hard to decipher, but to the best of my knowledge, it was said at least twice. Someone made a comment about them taking a sip and how that was crazy. So I don't know.
If it-
how is this different than somebody drinking cough syrup that has alcohol in it?
I was just gonna say that, Lori. I was like,
I
how is
thought
this
about
different than
that.
taking Robitussin DM at work, which you would
Mhm.
perfectly be allowed to do?
absolutely.
Or promethazine with codeine if you had a prescription. I mean, our law says they can't work impaired, and unless this was like a gigantic sip and it was grain alcohol or something like that, there's no way this person could have been impaired off of one sip. It's kind of where my head is.
The statute refers to working under the influence. So that doesn't use the term impaired. What I think you are getting at is perhaps an apparent lack of judgment. Where there, like Ms. Snare said, there was some indication that everybody knew that it contained alcohol, and yet someone went ahead and, engaged in that.
Personally, I understand where you're coming from. You don't want to see somebody get away with it, but in this particular circumstance, given the information available, I would think it should be dismissed myself.
I still feel like a letter of concern, because exactly what Ms. Galvin just mentioned, it's a judgment call. I think that we don't want to send the message that this is okay.
Again,
I could support a non-disciplinary letter of concern.
Right.
It was severe enough that the company did terminate the individual. That wouldn't be something that would prohibit them from getting a job or be disciplined on their permanent discipline on their license, but it would send a message if it was intentional that was not appropriate, at least.
I could agree with that.
I'll make that my motion as a letter of concern.
I second.
Motion and a second.
Non-disciplinary.
Right. Yeah, there's not a disciplinary.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Item 4G, Ms. Davis, if you can take over for this one, please.
Surely, this is complaint 23-0110. The complainant indicated that her medication was filled with the incorrect quantity than what the practitioner prescribed. It looked like after review of the video footage, it was indicated that the patient was shorted and the pharmacy replaced the correct number of capsules. My initial thought on this one was just some non-disciplinary CEs and error prevention. It doesn't appear that the pharmacy had any sort of, or the pharmacist had any sort of, ill intention. It was just, seems like an accident.
I would agree with that.
Yep, I'll be willing to make a motion if you'd like. 3 hours of non-disciplinary CE for the pharmacist and the technician above what's required in med error prevention with standard terms.
I second that motion.
Perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sounds good.
Ms. Davis, I'm recused from the next one as well.
Okay. All right. 4H is complaint 23-0112. The complainant indicated that she was given the wrong person's medication bottle inside the bag with the correct leaflet containing the patient information. This looks like it was just an accident where the product inside 2 bags got switched somehow. And if I remember, the pharmacist replaced the product. There was some maybe lack of documentation for counseling. So I don't know if that makes any difference to you guys, if you guys have any discussion.
Well, I wanted to note that I appreciate the steps they took to amend their practice. And I would recommend 3 hours non-disciplinary CE for the pharmacist.
I second that.
In error prevention?
Yeah, wasn't really making it, but I'll make a motion officially. The 3 hours of non-disciplinary CE in med error prevention above what's required for the pharmacist at standard terms.
And I second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, item 4I, complaint number 23-0086. A prescription was input, filled, and dispensed with the wrong dosage form.
This one's a little bit more unfortunate than a standard misfill in that the fact that it was dispensed with the non-extended release formulation could have exacerbated the seizure condition of this animal, which is obviously unfortunate. It sounds like there were some medical bills involved. I don't know what you guys.
I see it as the same action taken, which is a misfill. So I would treat it the same as another misfill in this category. I think that the issue with the billing or reimbursement or how that's handled is more of a customer service issue that's out of our scope.
I always have trouble when we've had something before, but it was human instead of a pet, but it still can have the same emotional and financial impacts if there's a problem. I always find that it's next to impossible to sue any organization unless you have a lot of money, and most people may or may not have enough to do that. And is it worth it? But I always find that to me, an organization that makes the mistake should cover the cost, whatever cost that is, as long as it's traditional and reasonable and that. And I find that unfortunate that there's nothing we can do about that.
We don't know though that wasn't done. Just because it's not in the response doesn't mean that there wasn't some sort of a settlement that occurred outside of this complaint.
And to me, that when there's a complaint, if you know that kind of thing, to me, then they went the extra step to deal with it. They did the extra things that really needed to be done. And that would make me feel that whatever we do should be on the lighter side versus something on the stronger side of that. That's why I brought that up. It seems like that would be a thing also to know as well. So,
I think this kind of goes along with the whole line of the last task force that we had around just culture. So we had talked about whether or not perhaps we should have some guidelines for what we would like to see in responses. I think there is a statutory requirement for companies to report if there's a settlement agreement over a certain number of dollars. I forget what that dollar amount is, so perhaps that fell below this, but maybe those are some suggested things that we could ask from respondents if we did work towards coming up with a standardized request. Ms. Snare, I think you were going the line of kind of our traditional 3 hours in med safety CE. I agree with that. I agree it's unfortunate, but just because there was harm doesn't mean it was any more negligent on the person that made the mistake. It's kind of where my head is. I really see all sides of it, but my initial thought was the 3 hours of CE as well.
Yes.
It's my understanding that the insurance companies that do our liability insurance don't do payouts for veterinary errors because they consider animals to be property. So I'm not sure if the person would have the opportunity to go through that route and get a settlement through their liability insurance company.
Probably depends on the contract. Some companies are self-insured too.
Yeah.
So.
well, it also depends if you on, and this is terrible. I personally think of pets as family, but that's not what's terrible. But what is, if you have a dog that's your pet. On the other hand, if you have an expensive working dog, or which I used to have a Belgian Malinois, which was trained at French Ring, Schutzen, and did all sorts of sports things with me. Very expensive dog, lots of money in the training. And if something had happened, I would have been devastated. So
I agree with you. I always look at my animals as family members too. I mean, so.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just think that we want to take a justice approach when our scope is more of a practice of pharmacy approach, which we would treat this just like we would another med error. So I'll make that my motion is for 3 hours of non-disciplinary CE to the pharmacist and technician in med error.
Hey, Kristen, I just have a question. So we have another case we're hearing about a digoxin overdose. Like, how is that? I'm new to the board, so I'm like, how is that different where that would require further action and this wouldn't?
I don't remember which case you're referring to, so I can't recall. Is the digoxin in this complaints? Because I don't remember that.
I think it's on the agenda. It's a conference.
Oh, okay. I probably haven't read that yet. I don't know if there's some high alert medications that have taken further steps on, if I'm recalling that correctly.
The other thing too is I think we need to look at, we'd like to try and take a standardized approach as much as we can. However, we do need to look at the mitigating circumstances under each that occur for each event.
personally,
Or
I
aggravating.
think any time there's a mistake, certainly, and that could be potentially dangerous to anybody. But if there was an error and somebody was hurt or an animal was hurt, to me, that takes it up a level. And that now there should be additional repercussions for that. I just can't see it as previously what we talked about, where they got the extra CE, but here's something where there's a problem that they had to deal with. I don't think it's fair to them, and I at all. Anyway, sorry. That's just my personal perspective. I realize there's only so much you can do, but that's how I differentiate with these things.
So the last complaint that we took, the person was given the wrong medication and that had potential to cause error as well. I mean, cause harm as well. And we handled that with CE. So I don't know that we should be splitting hairs on like handing out punitive action when it's a similar medication error. I just think that that's out of our scope. While I understand what you're saying, and I think like Lori said, each case is going to be looked at slightly different. I do think that the dosage form is a common error that falls within the med error, I guess, what we've used standardly as the CE.
I guess hanging is out of the question then.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand that feeling of like wanting to cause more hurt to the person who did it. I don't know what the more justice thought.
I don't feel that way at all. Quite the
More
contrary. I just think if there is a problem and someone is hurt or a pet is hurt, then it's the next level up. That's all. It's just not the same as the previous ones we've mentioned, because there something did happen, in this case to the pet, and that's all. I just think something needs to say you did something, and I'll give you an example. A person has a car accident and nobody's hurt. You have a car accident and someone's killed, you don't treat it the same way. I know that's an extreme, but I find it to be the same way here.
But that would be a criminal offense, right?
But that's a very fair point. Both are mistakes, if you
Yes.
will.
That's right.
Because
It's a
they're
very
judging
fair point.
outcome, and I feel like we're judging on the action that was taken.
Let me ask this: what would be a certainly CE, but what would be the minimum fine that you could impose here?
We could even do disciplinary CE if somebody felt like it needed to be disciplined. We have the ability to do a disciplinary order for CE if we wanted it to stay on their license. I mean, we typically have not fined for errors, like a monetary fine. We typically do either disciplinary or non-disciplinary continuing education is historically what we've done in the past.
Again, I just go back. I think when somebody is hurt, there has to be an additional reinforcement besides just the training. And I think the visual of that, whether it's a pet or a person, and I go back to that other training that we had. How does the public perceive what we're doing? Would they think the same way? Would they feel like we're doing our job? Yeah.
But what if it's the case that I gave the wrong strength or wrong dosage, like this is extended release versus immediate, I guess. So if I gave that to you and there was no negative outcome for you, but it's the same error,
I would still treat it as we've treated the previous ones. If there is harm that comes to the individual or the pet, then
so, but
I
the same
goose it up.
error would be treated differently.
I would treat the
Yeah.
error differently because it is an error that caused harm.
I mean, I think that we're supposed to be making judgments on the rule that they broke versus the outcome. More, that's my thought. I
Okay,
understand where you're coming from. And I do understand that, like,
I,
high risk patients or, different circumstances.
If that's the case and you give somebody, or the pet, in this case, but from that way of thinking, somebody who's given the wrong medicine and they die from it, would you still treat it the same way?
We have. They had a legal case outside of the board
Mhm.
for the damages and
Obviously, as a board member, I would always treat it differently. I could not.
I think this is a really healthy discussion, and it's probably enough discussion that perhaps we should, my recommendation would be that we discuss it as a full board next week,
that's a good idea.
rather than make a decision. So that way, for the purposes of,
And we can move on, but we can address the topic.
yeah, I just think that there's enough good discussion here, and it is good discussion.
Agreed.
I think it would be healthy to have it as a full board.
I agree.
I agree.
You want a separate agenda item on that, Madam Chair? I can put it under my.
No, why don't we just do this one, pull it off as full board discussion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to move this to full board discussion next week.
I second your motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, Ms. Davis, I am recused from the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. So I will let you take over.
Oh, fun. Okay. All right. So for complaint 23-0068, a patient was not provided counseling on a new prescription. It looks like it's the same medication that the patient had been taking and maybe just a different strength. And to add to that, the patient is also a former employee and it sounds like knows the people that work in the pharmacy. So I'm not sure if a complaint was made in some sort of retaliatory way or not. So I don't know what you guys thought.
I would be for dismissing it.
We're on 4J.
We are on 4J.
Mhm.
Okay. And you said it was regarding counseling?
So the patient got lisinopril hydrochlorothiazide, but it was the wrong strength, like maybe too much or too little hydrochlorothiazide. I don't remember, but it's a medicine that they have been on. Just it was
Okay.
filled for the incorrect strength, and then counseling wasn't provided because it sounds like that there was like a friendly catch up at the register
Okay.
between.
So for some reason, my notes and what you were saying weren't matching up, but now I'm in sync.
Okay.
I was of the mindset that no action for the pharmacist be taken because they weren't aware that a counsel was needed, but the technician was responsible to let the pharmacist know that a counsel was needed. So I would say non-disciplinary CE for the technician.
I could support non-disciplinary CE.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make that my recommendation unless there's any further discussion. Or I'll make it my motion. Mr. Thorwald, did you have anything you wanted to add before I make a motion?
I was just contemplating. No, I think I'll second your motion. I have mixed feelings, but I'll second that motion.
Okay, I'll state it completely now. So 3 hours CE, non-disciplinary for the technician involved. I would say counseling, but I don't think we'll find that many. So I'll just say in med error prevention for the technician. Beyond what's required using our standard terms.
A second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
And I am actually not recused from K. I jumped ahead of myself.
All right. I'll let you take K.
Got a little carried away. Complaint number 23-0116. A completed prescription was sold to an incorrect patient.
This just is 2 patients with the same name, so probably not enough, checking at the register, date of birth or address verification. It was and there seemed to be retraining performed by the pharmacist in charge afterwards. It was I wrote down to just do the standard non-disciplinary 3 hours of CE and error prevention.
I agree with you, but I just wanted to clarify that only for the technician and no action on the pick or the permit. That's my,
Correct. Yes, that is what I would suggest.
I would agree with that. This makes me go back to what we were talking about earlier. Air needs additional training. But again, if somebody's hurt, which there isn't in this case, again, that's the differential, I think, that for me. I always find it problematic. It's like some thing is you just cannot make errors in. This is certainly one of them in my mind in the pharmaceutical. A brain surgeon doesn't want to make errors. And a person disarming a mine, an explosive in the field doesn't want to make errors. They could go to pieces over their work. Pun intended. It's just there's so many risks at hand when you're doing something. I always wonder whether there's what is sufficient. I don't think it's just training. It's being distracted when you're working. If you're distracted, it's easier to make errors, even if you know everything that backwards and forwards. And I sometimes wonder if there should be training in how to help prevent you from being distracted as well in what you're doing, because how many errors are really caused by that versus not understanding the procedure and trying to be careful.
I think there's a lot of factors, but pharmacies usually going very quick in all directions. So I don't know how to fix that particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
But on this one, I agree with Ms. Davis. Did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I was just gonna make a motion of non-disciplinary CE 3 hours in error prevention for the technician and just, dismissal against the pharmacist and the permit.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, go ahead and take over, Ms. Davis, until I'll jump back in at 4P.
Okay, 4L is complaint number 23-0070. An incorrect delivery system was filled for a patient. So on an insulin, they got vials instead of pens. And in this particular case, it was very concentrated insulin and they didn't receive the correct types of needles to draw up the dose properly. But despite that fact, the patient must have been very familiar with insulin and gave themselves the correct dose. So I kind of was going with the same train that we've been on, is that this is a, dispensing error, and CE and error prevention would be kind of the same as what we've been doing, but I don't know if you guys have any other feedback.
I have the same feeling I've been having before, but I would agree with you based on what we've already been doing.
I'll make a motion, make it official. 3 hours of non-disciplinary CE for the pharmacist and the technician involved in med error prevention beyond what's required with our standard terms.
I second that motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's go to 4N, which is complaint 23-0102. And this was a possible diversion of a patient's controlled substance prescription that they had brought into the hospital with them. I'm not really sure. My initial notes on this one is I'm not really sure what kind of violation is the pharmacy's fault in this case, but I didn't know what you guys' thinking was.
Yeah, so I was thinking of it as a failure to report timely. And I was considering a $250 fine to the permit holder for failure to timely update their PIC.
I didn't remember this one having a PIC problem.
Yeah, there was.
Ms. Davis, can we confirm
Okay.
if we were on 4M like Mary or 4N like Nancy?
For N like Nancy. Did I skip one?
It's
Yes.
M.
We
M.
did.
Yeah,
I was looking at M, there was the
Yeah.
That,
PIC is
probably-
in the third paragraph.
that's probably my fault. I was doing for N like Nancy, so let's back
Gotcha.
up.
Yeah.
You guys are like, what are you talking about? Okay, sorry. For M like Mary, complaint 23-0103. This is a DEA 106 form that was filled out due to employee theft. And in this one, it agreed there was some PIC lack of updates for sure. So Kristen, if you want to kind of start over to where I interrupted you.
no, that's fine. I just was thinking that a $250 fine for the permit holder for failure to timely update their PIC information.
Yes, I mean, I agree with you. It does look like the pharmacy put procedures in place to make sure that the diversion, that they were being very tight on their controls on their hydrocodone tablets and I can
Yeah.
support
They addressed the theft, they addressed I think they addressed that all very well. The only thing that I think also needs to be addressed is the timely reporting of the PIC.
I can support that. You
What-
made a motion?
I just
No.
have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm still learning, obviously, these DEA form 106. What is the requirements on that form and how quickly does it need to be reported?
Mr. Gandhi, I'll let you
I
answer.
was like, from my understanding, it needs to be reported as soon as you find out and kind of have resolved the mystery, because you don't want to report that you lost X amount of tablets if that's not for sure yet.
Upon discovery of loss, it's 10 business days to report it to the Board of Pharmacy.
Now, I would suspect not all pharmacies have cameras and other protective things to be able to see that. Is there procedures that daily that help the PIC to or help someone to understand what that particular what the security is? Is there any reviews of anything at the end of the day to see if something is going on, or is that
Some
just not
have-
done?
Well, ongoing inventory, he should know what's on hand. Depends on, the item and like if it's a controlled 2 substance, so of higher possibility of having someone be addicted to it, it will have more scrutiny on it.
Yeah, so typically storage in a locked cabinet or a safe, perpetual inventory on the product, back counting after dispensing. There's lots of things pharmacies can do to kind of ensure proper controls on their controlled substance drugs.
From other discussions, I'm assuming there is this kind of equipment, but where you put controlled substances like that into some type of dispensing system where you have to put in the code to release X amount to dispense that. Is
Yeah,
there
so-
things like that?
Some pharmacies have kind of robot dispensing devices, but I would say it's probably not that common in this type of pharmacy.
Okay. Sorry to digress there. It just
No.
helps me to understand better.
Good to know what kind of controls they have in place. Yeah. I would say most places have some type of cameras. I mean, obviously, this type of large business certainly does. It seems to me that they've addressed that portion of the complaint. So I will make it my motion for a $250 fine for failing to timely update the PIC information.
I'll second your motion.
Perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Okay, let's try this again with 4N like Nancy. This is complaint -23-0102. And this is the complaint in which a patient was allowed to bring in their own medication for a controlled substance while they were in the hospital. And then that medication was either diverted or lost. And my question is to the actual rule or law that was broken by the hospital pharmacy in this case. I do see that possible violation administration of drugs. It does sound like in this case, the pharmacist in charge put lots of policies and procedures into place as to what to do next time that a patient is brought in with medication from the outside that's a controlled substance.
Mhm.
Didn't know what you guys' initial thoughts were.
I do have another question. I'm sorry to, in this one, the Arizona Board of Nursing is involved. How do they interact with this, typically? If it's
It
in a,
appears that the diversion, if it occurred, was by a nurse. So there wasn't any diversion issues from the standpoint of the pharmacist or the pharmacy, but there may have been some lack of keeping control over drugs that they were responsible to be.
Well, I think
In
Mr.
contact.
Thorwald's saying, have we contacted the nursing board regarding this? Has this
Yeah.
been sent to them, right?
and I see it mentioned, but I was wondering if they've been contacted. The other things that my questions about all of this is, if a patient brings it in, the likelihood of them giving it to the nurse or somebody else to take care of, unless they're going to stick it in the drawer or put it on the bedside next to them. I don't see how the hospital or the nurse isn't responsible for this.
Hi, this is Sandy. Can I speak to this complaint,
Hi.
please?
Yes, please, Sandy.
Hi. The rule requires the hospital pharmacy to have policies and procedures for handling patients' own medication. So it is the responsibility of the pharmacy. Storage of the medications can either be in the pharmacy or in a medication area under the pharmacy control, which it appears that's where the medication was in this particular complaint. It was in the medication room. It looks like from reading through Dennis's summary that the medication should have been stored in a tamper-resistant bag, which was part of the process that the hospital pharmacy had developed, and that process was missed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I actually have in my notes as a failure to control the medication. And so it's kind of online what Sandy just mentioned. I was thinking a letter of concern to the PIC and the permit holder.
Disciplinary or non-disciplinary?
A letter of concern is non-disciplinary.
To the PIC and the permit holder.
Yeah. I'm glad to see they put in new process, but this kind of serves as a reminder that that's important to have control over the medications that are in this medication cabinet.
Yeah, you can see why a lot of hospitals don't allow patients to bring in external meds because I think it's
Well,
tricky.
it's not going to be used during their hospital stay, so I don't understand the purpose, but
I'm going to second your motion, but I still have another question after I do that. And I'm going to go back to the Board of Nursing. Do they have any disciplinary areas within this? Part of the reason I'm asking this is they were just before us at GERC this morning and last week, and we were talking about some of these related subjects. And we were talking about remote education and so forth. And the director and I chatted for about a half an hour after the meeting on how they control and how they inspect. So is there overlapping authority here, overlapping potential penalties for people here?
I'm not sure. I guess this would maybe be a question for Cam, but I'm not sure what our responsibility is to refer to the nursing board. We don't even have the nurse's name who was involved in the complaint, as far as I know.
There's not an overlap between the two agencies or any other agency. We do refer when there's responsibility from the nurse or medical practitioner or something. After we adjudicate the complaint on our end, the board typically refers us or directs us to refer that case to the appropriate agency so that they can take a look at what happened with their licensing. In this case, we don't have the nurse's information, but that doesn't prevent us from sending it over for them to take a look at.
Is that typically done when something like this occurs, or?
When there's multiple disciplines involved here, different agencies, jurisdiction, it does happen, yes.
I second your motion.
Well, let me officially make it. I'm not sure if I
Oh,
did or
okay.
but that is a letter of concern to the PIC and the permit holder for failure to control substance.
I second your motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Before we go on, can we go back to 4M where you are recommending assessing the civil penalty? Is that civil penalty disciplinary or non?
I would say non.
Is
just a,
that agreeable to the?
Yeah.
It
Okay,
is.
thanks,
just a failure to notify, yes.
thanks.
Okay, 4O is 23-0036. And this is a licensee failed to report charges within 10 working days and failed to disclose charges on her initial license application. What were you guys thinking here?
I was thinking a conference, and I actually have some questions for Ms. Galvin. Maybe I can discuss that at the conference.
Yeah, I mean, if it was just the failure to notify, for within 10 working days, I can see assessing a civil penalty, but there's a lot of failure to disclose in this case. So I'd be in support of that as well.
One of the things that I was wondering is about a fitness of duty evaluation, if that's appropriate or something that we could order before the conference. Ms. Galvin, do you have a comment on that?
If there's a potential substance use issue, Cam could order that on his authority, under his authority. If there's, I don't remember, Cam, if you've ever exercised authority with respect to maybe a psychological issue that would result in this kind of felony aggravated assault. What is it? I mean, not to diminish this, but it was one
The type of program that was required by the court. Is what I'm commenting on.
Oh, yeah, I see the type of, you're right. That could be appropriate, and that could be a recommendation that you make to the board. And that could be an interim order for that type of evaluation.
I just have a question. When a subpoena is issued and they partially respond to the request in the subpoena, how is it followed up then to try to get the rest of what's been requested? Or is there an interim piece before it comes to the board, or how does that done?
I mean, there are usually at least a couple of attempts by staff made.
Yeah, there are follow-up communications saying, thank you for your response. We're still missing such and such information. So.
Thank you.
All right, so Kristen, did you make a motion for conference or?
I'll make a motion for conference and fitness of duty evaluation.
I second that motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're back to P, and I think Lori can take
Yep,
over.
I'm back on this one. Yep, 23-0015. An inspector could not inspect the facility and no response has been received from the permit holder. thoughts?
I was
Uh,
wondering what options we have. I was thinking a conference, but I don't know that they're gonna show. Maybe a conference, and if no response, proceed to hearing.
I was thinking either hearing or a conference with a subpoena for appearance.
So we're kind of similar.
I had also written down conference for what I was thinking on this one.
And I would recommend a subpoena. If you're going the conference route, also issue a subpoena, and that would be one more data point that we could use if it goes to formal hearing.
And we can add the caveat that if no response, proceed to hearing.
We would, I think, do that at the conference, wouldn't we, Ms. Galvin, if they
Yes.
don't appear?
Yes.
Okay.
We typically have, when we issue a subpoena, we give them a deadline. If they don't respond, there's an agenda item saying failure to respond to a subpoena, move to hearing section in our law book, in our board book. So we'll appropriately agendize it if they don't respond.
Well, they wouldn't be required to respond. It would be compelling them to appear.
Oh, sorry, yep, they won't appear.
So would the motion be subpoena for a conference?
Issue a subpoena to appear for a conference, yes.
So I'll make a motion to issue a subpoena to appear before as a conference.
Second.
Second.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 4Q 22-0342. A complainant alleged that it took multiple phone calls to receive medication, and when the medication arrived, it was not out on ice and the outside temperature was 110 degrees. Noting Ms. Snare's recusal. Discussion on this item.
There was a change of insurance, a refill too soon, a prior authorization, and then it does look like that there was some information from the manufacturer regarding storage and temperature excursions, and it was my thinking that we should dismiss this one.
I was thinking the same thing. They provided pretty strong evidence that it was still shipped appropriately while it was warm. The excursion seemed appropriate and within the USP guidelines and manufacturer's guidelines.
Yeah, so I will make a motion to dismiss.
Mr. Thorold, anything to add before we, or do you want a second?
I do have just one question.
Yeah,
The shipper, does the company use their own people, their own distribution network, or is it shipped overnight by a separate company? How is that typically handled?
most pharmacies, and this is a mail order pharmacy, use either USPS or FedEx or UPS overnight or some other method depending on the type of drug. It depends on what the temperature is, generally speaking, outside, where it's going, a bunch of mitigating factors. If it needs to be refrigerated, if it's an ambient product, if the product is, extremely temperature sensitive. But generally speaking, most products can go out of range for a certain amount of time, regardless of how it's delivered. But usually pharmacies would ship the medication pursuant to that information based on how long a drug could have that excursion based on what the manufacturer is saying.
To me, this is the shipper's, the shipping company's fault, not the pharmacy. So I would concur with what you've said already.
So Ms. Davis made a motion for dismissal. Did you want to second that, Mr. Thorwald?
I do. Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on to item 4R. Complaint number 23-0198. A pharmacy reported alleged unprofessional conduct by a pharmacy technician whose license was on probation.
This one seemed very much like a he said, she said situation. As far as the technician being impaired, the technician very adamantly denied that, but did admit that they were maybe inside the computer system where they shouldn't be. And I just kind of wanted to hear more up from both sides to see if we could figure out if there was any violation here, and I wrote down to request a conference.
In my notes, I will just comment that I feel like a dismissal is appropriate. The person's already being monitored and is in good standing. The behavior, like you said, isn't substantiated. So that's just where I was at with it.
It's really hard to do anything in a he said, she said kind of situation. Not unless it's on camera. People can have a bad day and say something and you're off to the races. Or I'm for dismissal myself.
I could be supportive of a dismissal. I don't see anything that was like egregious law problems on behalf of the technician.
Yeah, and
It's
getting
just
into
quite-
this and looking at an example, that part is a legitimate business decision. You know, it's not like they're writing down phone numbers or something that would be inappropriate.
Yeah. It's just quite the allegation on behalf of the permit.
Yeah.
What scares me a little bit about this one is when you look back at the history with this technician and how they ended up on a monitoring contract, it was similar behavior, where they were impaired at work and those kinds of things. So that is what kind of scares me a little bit.
You know, I considered that, but what would we do? Put her on a contract, you know, or, I mean,
I don't know. I mean, do we need to evaluate if she's fit for duty? I don't know if that's too much of a burden. I mean, it looks like she's compliant with her contract. I don't know. It just, the allegations are pretty significant considering her prior history is the only thing that.
but I don't feel like it supports it. Like, I understand, and I really was wrestling with that as well, but I don't think the evidence supports the allegation.
Part
And
of the-
she's already being monitored.
Part of the issue I find, if somebody has, this has just been my personal experience. If I see somebody, I know a number of people who have had issues with alcohol or drugs. And I don't know if it's common between all in this situation, but each one of them also seem to have altered their personalities a little bit so that they are, how do I put it? In the cases that I know, and I'm not saying this is across the board because I certainly don't have the experience to know that these people have been a little rougher around the edges, I would say, in dealing with other people and communicating, ruffling feathers. And that's what I was thinking when I was reading this and when I was listening to everybody. If the person is already on monitoring, obviously they're not indulging. So I was thinking of the other. That's why I not that I like people being rude or improper, but again, what do you do about it?
If you have concerns, one suggestion may be that you require her to go through a mini evaluation, or at least have a session with the physician monitor that is part of the monitoring program, and have her have a session or two with that individual to kind of take the current temperature.
I would be in favor of that.
That's a good suggestion. I mean, and there's just, I don't know, some questions I don't know, like she's probably required to be tested, but how often is she being tested? Depending on the substance, something may or may not even be in her system. unless she's getting tested really, really frequently.
I could go with that as well.
So, Ms. Galvin, what would a motion look like if that's the direction we'd like to go?
Yeah, given that she's under a monitoring agreement, just recommend to the board that they order that she undergo a mini evaluation, or at least have a session with the monitoring programs physician to assess the recent events and the recent accusations.
And have that report provided to the board?
Yes.
You know, I can support that. I'm just a little bit nervous that we just don't have any factual evidence. I still am kind of hung up on that. It can be, could have been retaliatory in
And-
some sense.
And that bothers me too.
But you do have some evidence that she was engaging in conduct on the computer system that she was not authorized. There's an assertion that she, you know, blacked out for a period of time, doesn't remember an hour or so of work. Given if she wasn't under a monitoring agreement, I would probably, you know, agree with you. But the fact that she is, the board has an obligation to ensure that she's in compliance and that she is healthy and that she's safe to practice. Just having her check in with the monitoring programs addiction psychologist is completely appropriate and within your authority.
Okay, and then I would like to know exactly what Ms. Walmsley was asking about, how often she's tested, like frequency.
And you could ask the, I believe it's PAPA, ask them to send you the last, you know, whatever 3 months of results. They should be able to provide that to the board prior to the meeting.
Ms. Galvin, would a evaluation of the type that you're recommending also include fitness for duty? And the letter that we received from the permit holder, they said that they believe that she's engaged in unprofessional conduct and is mentally unable to perform her job.
What I would do is in your recommendation, this information would be provided to the addiction psychiatrist. Let her, like I said, just do a review of everything. And if something more in depth is required, then she would let us know.
I think that makes good sense.
I
Okay.
agree. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'm not sure how to phrase it, but I will take a stab. I make a motion for the technician to be evaluated by a PAPA contracted, I don't know,
Addiction psychiatrist. Just to have a session with her to inform that addiction psychiatrist of the most recent revelations and seek the addiction psychiatrist input on what the next steps could be. Just that she would confer with that addiction psychiatrist.
And provide a report to the board.
And
Okay.
that staff, if you could ask PAPA for perhaps the last 3 months of testing, and then you would get an idea of the frequency that's happening.
And fit for duty, fit for work.
I think the evaluator, once she meets with her and looks at these most recent evaluations, we don't want to have to, if you don't mind, undergo a fitness for duty that's going to cost $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. If the addiction psychiatrist who's overseeing all of this thinks that, you know, there's not a basis for it.
But if they have a concern, then that would trigger that type of
Yes.
an evaluation based on that.
Yes. And their psychiatrist is very familiar with the board operations.
My motion includes all that Ms. Galvin just detailed.
Perfect.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, moving on to 4S. Complaint 23-0020, a pharmacist employment was terminated for purchase policy violations.
I kind of think about this one similarly to the alcoholic Christmas presents. The person here violated the company policy for sure, but I don't see a violation of pharmacy law, and they did pay for the product. They just took a dose first. So I'd be in favor of dismissal.
And I'm torn. I think we've had a case somewhat similar with ibuprofen. And I was going to ask if anyone could recall how we handled that. The difference though, it is theft. It is a medication. It wasn't paid for immediately. And I think if you use something before you paid for it, technically that is theft. It was paid for like a month later or something.
I think Ms. Snare, the difference is the ibuprofen was taken, but I don't think it was ever paid for.
Another detail to that is the prescription, the ibuprofen was prescription strength.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought there was over-the-counter products involved in that as well. That's what I was thinking.
We've had other cases, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, where people were like
Soda or something.
taking like food and sodas and those kinds of things. It was pretty significant amount of theft. I don't remember how we handled that in that case, but like it was multiple instances and a much more substantial amount of money. Not that,
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm torn.
Yeah, the ibuprofen, I believe we had an interesting solution of them being a speaker at Midwestern or something.
But again, that was a prescription drug too.
Yeah.
So I think that's also very different.
Yeah.
The things that bothers me here is not paying for it for an extended period. I can see where a person, they may have been coughing. I need to take this. I'll pay later as I get done, but I'm coughing right now. I need to take something to do this. And then they get busy and they just forget.
Right.
Or it could be certainly on purpose. But it is just as easy to be busy and forget. As everybody's mentioned before, pharmacies are pretty crazy places. So they've already been terminated for this. That's a pretty heavy penalty. And they paid. And I mean, it's not like this is a $5,000 item. Maybe $10 or 20 at the most. So I have mixed feelings about that for that reason.
Me too.
I mean, if the person had a history of it from place to place, but or if they had walked away with something that was very expensive, then I would have a different view of it.
And I mean, there's not a clear violation here. I mean, if it was a prescription drug, there would be a clear violation. The fact that it's not a prescription drug makes it a little bit more gray, in my opinion. It's poor judgment. So it's whether or not it really rises to the level of unprofessional conduct, or if it was just, to your point, Mr. Thorwald, a simple mistake that they forgot about and then they paid for it later.
I would tend to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I would too in this particular case. So are you leaning towards the dismissal?
Yes.
You know, I do have another concern that was mentioned in the termination of other issues of maybe not understanding some aspects of their job.
That's not what the complaint is about, though.
So we can't address it.
Ms. Galvin?
And they would have an obligation to inform you if there were actions on her part that involved the practice of pharmacy that could be in violation of your statutes and rules, and they didn't. They just noted other reasons for her dismissal. So I would not think that it would be appropriate to investigate those grounds.
Okay.
When dismissing somebody, you're gonna throw in every possible thing you can possibly can, so that it's less chance that the person can come back upon you, whether they're true or not.
They're not things that I feel comfortable with, but yeah, if we can't address it here, then we can't address it.
I'm gonna go ahead and make the motion. We dismiss this.
So I have
I'll
a
second.
second. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Is everybody doing okay, or do we need a break? We've got like about 10 more, I think.
I'm gonna have to drive in about 10 minutes, but I'll still be on the call, just so you know.
Okay, okay, let's keep going then unless anybody objects. 4T 22-0670. Pharmacy failed to provide written notice to the board at least 14 days before discontinuing operations and may have dispensed prescriptions into Arizona without a permit.
My thought on this one is to call them in for a conference so we can actually get some records and see if that is or is not true.
I think what typically done is had staff work with them to make a consent agreement, and they provide that information to the staff of how much they've shipped in.
The other thing that I just want to call to notice out of the reading is this is a non-resident pharmacy that looks like it may have had some issues with the other board and some things that might be still ongoing. So I would be in support of either tabling it till the next meeting so that we can also find out what the outcome of the other situation was, or potentially calling a conference. Because I think we may learn more.
I would also want to know if they left if they had any regular users of prescriptions that they left hanging. Did they notify them that they were closing?
If we called a conference, do you think by then we would have other information? Because we wouldn't be able to, would we be able to discuss any further information that we had?
According to the narrative, there's a hearing scheduled before the board on July 12th. I think our next meeting would be in August. I think it would be potentially a conference for that meeting.
Okay, let's call for a conference. That's my motion.
Any other discussion or second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Ms. Davis, I'll let you take over for you, please.
Surely. All right, so complaint number 23-0069. Patient's caregiver alleged 3 prescription errors, 1 involving receipt of an incorrect quantity of a prescribed drug and 2 involving receipt of a drug which was not prescribed. The narrative shows that evidence was found to support a shortage on one of the fills, but was not found to support the misfill allegations. Did you guys have any thoughts on this one?
No, I mean, I was along the lines that 3 hours CE. I don't see that there's enough proof that there's a violation occurred in the previous, just on the shortage of tablets, as you just read.
Yeah, that's where I was at too. I didn't know, Mr. Thorwald, if you have any additional thoughts.
I have no additional thoughts related to this. My thoughts are going to caregivers in assisted living facilities and other types of things that dispense medication from the blister packs, and they're not correct all the time. Far more often than they shouldn't be, or giving the wrong people medication, which has no relationship to this. So
It's hard for pharmacies to misfill prescription medications with things they don't have in stock and aren't able to order. So I don't really see a violation of any kind there, but
Yeah. So I was saying 3 hours CE, non-disciplinary for the pharmacist and technician. in med error prevention beyond what's required with standard terms.
Second,
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Aye. Sounds good.
All right, I'm going to jump to the next one that I'm recused from just in case we lose Kristen when she has to drop. Item 4I complaint, I'm sorry, 4Y 23-0158. A pharmacist refused to fill a prescription.
Okay, so you want me to do this one, Lori? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, please, just so we make sure we have quorum.
Perfect. Okay, so a pharmacist refused to fill a prescription. Cliff notes, this patient had been getting this prescription filled at this pharmacy for a very, very long time. The pharmacist did inform the patient and the prescriber of the expectation of them getting a pain management physician. So when the patient filed the complaint, they did know that this was coming. It seemed like I don't really see any violation here on behalf of the pharmacist or the pharmacy, but I didn't know what you guys were thinking.
The pharmacist is not named, but I agree with you that the pharmacist made it clear, and I don't see holding the permit holder responsible. So I would say dismiss.
And I have mixed feelings about these types of things. Obviously, there's issues with medications out in the marketplace for pain. But at the same time, if the doctor has prescribed it on a regular basis, that person should be the ultimate authority on this because they know the patient, they know what they're going through. And in my view, the pharmacist should fill it. If they think there's a problem, they should notify the doctor and whoever else would be in that process, whether it be the AG's office or whomever, that they feel that there should be additional discussions, maybe that the doctor is doing something they shouldn't. But I think that as long as there is a written, viable prescription, it's been checked by the doctor, the pharmacist should issue it. And I know they have the ability not to do that, but that's just my perspective.
Well, I think the pharmacist is also a medical professional that provides a check and balance for the provider, and not allowing that to occur is a real problem for pharmacy. You know, they have a professional responsibility on their end to uphold as well. So not allowing that would be a real problem for pharmacy.
And again, I go back to, is that person seeing the doctor is seeing the person? They know whether they have pain management. The other person, the pharmacist, does not know. They've contacted the doctor back. The doctor doesn't have an issue with it, unless that doctor is just giving out drugs to give out drugs and is getting some kind of kickback in all of this. The doctor should know best for that patient, and the pharmacist follows their duty, talks to the doctor, does what they need to do. Here's my concerns. If the doctor says, no, we need to give the person this, I think the pharmacist should give it to them.
I
That's
think
just,
Like, the pharmacist did inform the doctor of their intention to cease filling prescriptions in a month. So they are 6 weeks even. The pharmacist gave plenty
I
of
read that.
notification.
I did read that, and I understand that, but that's why I added it in, because I thought the pharmacist, in my mind, did everything they should do, and the doctor apparently said, give it to them, continue. In that case, I think the pharmacist should have done it.
Also, I think it kind of stems from the CDC making recommendations of who should be prescribing.
Mhm.
And a lot of pharmacies really took that to heart, not to mention they can be in trouble for, how
Again.
they on their end.
And I understand that. And for instance, let's say the pharmacist did not call the doctor back, did not do the check, did not make the warning out there, then I would say they did not do their job and there was a problem here. But they made all of those efforts here. Once, and the doctor came back and said, this is what we need. Therefore, I think the pharmacist should have issued it.
The patient was verbally abusive, constantly requesting early refills and trying to pay with like discount cards as well as their insurance. I can see why the pharmacist would make an executive decision to just say, you know what, this isn't worth it anymore.
And I can completely understand that, but that to me is not related to the drug as stated here. That is, what is stated here is, in that case, would be an excuse for putting up with a bad behaving a person. In my mind, if you there are people out there who you just don't want to be around or deal with, but that is certainly different, a different reason than what's explained here.
But there is a rule that allows and really mandates that a pharmacist exercise his or her professional judgment when dispensing prescriptions.
Mhm.
And that's what in my opinion, took place in this case. Had he or she not done that, and there was some sort of issue with the patient and whether there was an overdose or whatever, then you could hold the pharmacist responsible for dispensing. So I think there's a difference of we can't question whether the pharmacist has that authority because he or she does. And we have to leave it up to their professional judgment when they exercise it, I think is what Ms. Davis and Ms. Snare were trying to convey.
And I understand that. I'm just saying that I could also make the argument the other way, and contrary to what you said, for the other opinion. And
I think at the end of the day, we'd be at an impasse, you know,
Yeah.
and we can debate this all day long.
of
but-
course, yeah, it's just one of those things. To me, it sounds more like the pharmacist did it because the person was not a very nice person to be around, and I would have probably wanted to do the same thing. And
But
you
I
have to
also-
justify it. So
Describing it. So they wanted it through a pain medication specialist as well.
mhm.
But I'm prepared to make a motion. I think this great. I appreciate your input. I mean, it's good to ask those questions because it's important to examine these things. I'll make
Board
a motion.
members, if I may jump in real quick.
Yeah.
This is Compliance Officer Ben Castañeda. I just want to bring your attention to the third paragraph in the summary. During the investigation, it was discovered that the permit holder did not file a change in PIC inventory in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I had that noted. I was thinking similarly to what I had done before on that. I was thinking a $250 non-disciplinary fine for failure to notify a PIC change to the permit holder and take note, dismiss action on the refusal to fill the prescription.
My concerns noted. I will second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Lori, we need to go back to
Yeah, I'm
V's,
sorry, I'm
Victor?
trying to get off mute, Peter, get off mute here. 4 V as in Victor. 23-0087. Complainant indicated that one of her tablets was different from those of the rest of her bottle. Complainant also stated that more than a year ago, a generic prescription was billed as a brand name product.
I know that we treat each case on its merits, but I feel like that we have issued quite a bit of CE to this person.
I agree. I think what bothered me about that is there's two things. So first of all, that this individual has been before us as well as this pharmacy for numerous different things. However, I do think that there is a lack of evidence of both of these allegations based on the information that we have before us. Doesn't mean it doesn't concern me, but
It is
food for
the
thought.
just understanding the story better. I want to clarify one thing because I was kind of reading it a little with a misunderstanding. Was this a known issue where medications have been mixed? And then when it was dispensed, it wasn't noticed that one was missed? I wasn't sure about that.
It looked to me, Kristen, like it was a partial fill that they completed with amoxicillin 875 instead of Augmentin 875.
Oh, okay. I thought it was one tablet within the container that was incorrect. Yeah, one tablet within the container. So, but they were aware, it sounded like, that it was a known issue, that maybe at some point they'd been combined and they try to separate them. And I don't know if I'm just adding to the story or.
So the pharmacist statement is when the patient came in for the remainder of her partial fill, one amoxicillin 875 got mixed with the Augmentin. Even when we did our double check, we missed the one pill. Could have been that it was at the bottom or in the middle. So when we opened the vial and checked the medication, it was missed.
Yeah, that's what I understand. So even though they did their best, one was missed. So were they already combined and they did their best to separate them?
I'm not sure.
I don't know, but
I have a question. Dr. Gandhi or Jennifer, can you help me remember what happened as a result of the last issue we had with them? Did we ask them to hire a consultant and some different things? I think we did.
I think so. And CE, and
Yeah, I believe you're correct.
And that was to be completed within like 6 months or something like that, 6 months, 9 months, something like that.
Yeah, I would want to verify that really quick.
How long ago was that?
A meeting or two ago, and it looks like this incident happened in February. So it looks like kind of it was happening all throughout the same time as we were going through the other disciplinary process.
How often is this medication typically given out?
very frequent, normal.
Especially this time of year.
Yeah.
And they look very different. One is a capsule and one is a tablet.
I think I've had amoxicillin 875 tablets before.
It says it's
Is
a
there?
tablet. Yeah, it says it's a tablet in the reading.
It shouldn't have never been in the same bottle, so.
Yeah.
Correct.
And that just that response that you read is where I was getting like, what? So they knew it was in there, but they did their best to get it out. I don't know that it matters. I was just confused on what it meant.
If we're treating this like some of the cases earlier, we can assign more CE and error prevention because this is an error that didn't hurt anybody. But we have assigned a lot of CE to this person already, so I don't know what to do about
I
that.
feel like the timing matters. Like Miss Walmsley was kind of alluding, like this came in and we asked them to get a consultant. I think
I think it was after this. I mean, I certainly think the consultant is going to find gaps in their policies and procedures and all of those kinds of things, which is the reason why we ask for it. I think that there's probably a lot of opportunities based on what we've seen in the past. I think that's probably where this billing issue potentially came from as well. I would hope that the consultant would uncover that and there would be, substantive changes that are made. I don't know. I'm torn on this because on one hand of it, I'm like, okay, well, we continue to see issues with the same pharmacy. Now, granted, each event is on its own, but I don't know. It's not a great pattern.
Well, I was asking about the time frame and the how often the medication is used was to determine, in my mind, if this was going on back in February at the same time we're have asked them to get a consultant in there. This could have been problems that existed prior to, and now they are getting them resolved. So are we going to do something that's already now resolved? Yes, they have a history, but is this still part of that previous history, their errors, or are they now on the straight and narrow, so to speak?
I think the timing was before we asked for the consultant. I don't know. I guess just throwing out an idea. We're going to get a report from the consultant that's going to identify things. Maybe we do this as a letter of concern so that we have it documented. And if and when we get the report, we can consider that in its entirety. I don't know that I think more CE is going to necessarily fix this. I don't know that I think we need to happen before we ask for the consultants. We're already addressing, I think this would be addressed within what we've already asked for. So
I completely agree. I agree with that. I think given how much CE, it would be useless to move forward with that, but a letter of concern establishes it for future potential action if it's necessary, in my mind.
How much CE have we already given? I don't know if we should go backwards on standard procedure. I was thinking maybe not giving more than what we normally would, but I don't know if we should give less than we normally would.
Ms. Canavong, can you pull up the order and see what we asked for?
I want to say it was like 9 hours when we added it all together because it was multiple different.
Yeah, I think it was like law and patient safety. I think there was a couple of different categories.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of different matters with, as you've stated, with this permit. So I want to be sure that we provide you correct information because a lot of it has blended together.
Perhaps to give you time, we table it for full board discussion, and then you can provide that summary to the board next week.
We can do that.
Is that a fair recommendation so that we have staff has time to put it all together and give a summary?
I like that.
Yes.
Would someone like to make that motion?
I think you've stated your intention.
Okay.
You're good.
All right. For W23-0225, permittee may have failed to notify the board of an address change and change of PIC.
I
What's
think
the-
that we need to move to conference. They haven't been responsive. And then proceed to hearing if they don't respond at that point.
That's what I wrote down too.
Should we add a subpoena for appearance?
Yes, I'll make that my motion. Proceed to conference and subpoena appearance.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. 4X complaint 23-0049. A manufacturer was shipping into Arizona without a valid permit.
This one is complicated.
I think how we've handled this in the past, and I guess just to recap it here, the way that I see it, there were 61 shipments without a license. What we've typically done in the past is allow the executive director to engage in a discussion with the permit holder to come up with a consent agreement for a fine.
I think that's the best way to go.
I think that based on the letter from their attorneys, they dispute shipping into Arizona without a permit. It starts on 1398. So I'm not sure what to do if the permittee disputes the complaint.
Got it for a conference.
It's a good suggestion. We could set a conference and then have a discussion with them and see why they feel that way and be able to ask questions in an interactive manner.
Seems fair.
Is that your motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. We've already done 4Y, 4Z. Complaint number 23-0176. A patient received a completed prescription order without a label.
It's kind of similar to the giving more CE to CE getters situation in that this seems to be kind of a pattern. I know we had a conference about this same issue last time and the time before. So I don't know if we should bring this to conference as well.
Dr.
What about a
Gundy,
go ahead, Lori.
I think we have another pending conference for a similar issue with this same permit holder that we asked for at the last meeting in addition to the conference that we had. Can you remind me if that was the case and what was the outcome of that last case?
That's correct. You asked for a conference in the last case, and they requested postponement until August. The prior case that held the conference, the technician was issued a non-disciplinary order for continuing education.
I think perhaps this is where my head is perhaps we add this and call both for conference for August, since it's a similar issue.
I agree. Conference. And maybe let them know that we'd like to see what steps they've taken because we've seen this before us multiple times now.
Agree.
Any other discussion? Or do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion for a conference.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 4AA, 23-0211. Licensee failed to report charges within 10 working days.
I was thinking the standard $250 failure to notify civil penalty,
Non-disciplinary. Is
non-disciplinary.
that your motion?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 4AB, 23-0209. A licensee violated a board order and failed to comply with the subpoena.
Did I read it correct that they've had no CE ever, or they just didn't comply with the current time frame?
They haven't complied with their as of this morning, when I checked, they had finally complied and completed the required 3 hours of CE from the previous case. I don't know that they've never completed CE. It was just for this case, it was the 3 hours that were required by the board.
And did we ever receive a response from the subpoena, or is that still the case?
No, the respondent has called multiple times, but he's never provided a written response. He didn't actually notify staff that the CE had been completed. I just happened to check this afternoon before we came in.
might be a little hard to argue he hasn't complied with the subpoena when he has been in touch with staff.
And he has now complied with the order.
Correct.
Is there some sort of standard thing that we do or can do for people that we can't get a hold of?
Well, it sounds like we did get a hold of him. We just didn't get the written response, which is what we were requesting.
He's difficult to get a hold of. His email does not work and he cannot collect his mail. So he's only available by phone.
Why can he not collect his mail?
According to his verbal response, he has lost his mail key and cannot get a new one.
Okay.
So that means that the information that's provided in his profile is correct, or
His mail is not.
Is
His
it
mail
not
does not
correct?
get returned. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. You're answering. That's what I asked.
Okay. His mail does not get returned. He claims that is his correct address. He just cannot access his mail.
Well,
His email address he also claims is correct. He just cannot get into his email because of his phone.
Is he working?
Yes, the order was issued after a complaint filed against the pharmacy at which he works.
where is his mail? Is it a box at a apartment complex? Is it a postal box? Even if, no matter where it is, they either always have spare keys, or you could pay a small fee and have a new key made to get your mail. So that doesn't make any sense to me. And if you can't get your email, you can go to a library if you don't have a computer and get your email. If you've forgotten your password, you can get a new password. So I don't find any of those valid arguments.
Sounds to me like we have enough questions that it might be worth to bring him in for a conference.
I would certainly send a message.
I think, yeah, sure. Let's do a conference. I mean, I would not be against doing some kind of fine for failure to reply in a timely manner, or failure to reply completely with a subpoena, something along those lines. But I mean, I'd be fine with doing a conference as well.
What are we going to learn though? I mean, I don't know. I have a problem with the fact that he didn't do it in time.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, he didn't comply with the order for that matter.
Right.
But he has now complied.
And
How
that
he-
there is CE aspect to this as well, where there would be a penalty for it not being done. I mean, using our grid.
Well, if he keeps going down this road, to me, he would be in violation of not having he would not have a mailing address that sufficiently works. So he has no mailing address. If it doesn't work and he can't get it, there is no address. So I find that to be very problematic.
Like, I don't know anything about this person, but if you don't have a way to get a hold of you via mail or email, there seems to be a fitness for duty question, because email is free. Like, you can sign up for a new email address.
I don't know about fitness for duty, but maybe whether or not they're regulatable.
Fair.
I don't know that,
Right.
like Miss Walmsley said, I don't know that we'd learn more by speaking with the person.
What if we do a disciplinary letter of concern for failure to comply with the board order?
But he won't
Timely.
get it.
Letter of censure, right, if it's disciplinary.
But he won't get it when we mail it to him.
He's not getting the mail is not coming back. Staff said it's not being returned. So
I would love to see a letter, some kind of correspondence from whoever has the mailbox. Why they cannot get a key. If he can't provide that, then as far as I'm concerned, he is misrepresenting the facts. And why he can't go to a library to get his email. I mean, there's very simple things.
But I'll just make a recommendation to do a conference. We can ask these questions. We can.
Potentially do the disciplinary letter of concern then, or what have you,
right.
but at least we get to see him and his eyeballs and talk to him.
Yes, I'll make a motion for a conference.
Let me ask one more question. Since he can't get an email and can't get letters, and he can only get phone calls occasionally, how are we going to notify him?
Can we serve him a subpoena at his work since we know where his employer is, or at least we believe we know where his employer is?
If when we serve him a subpoena, can we ask for within that subpoena for him to provide some type of validation with regard to why he can't get an email and why he can't get a key to open his mailbox?
The only obligation we have is to communicate with him at his last known address of record. We aren't obligated to take all of these extra steps to track him down. There's nothing that says he has to have an email. There's nothing that says he has to go to his mailbox a certain number of times a week. We have his last known address of record. That's where we send in. And if he doesn't comply, then we kind of go along the lines that Ms. Snare was suggesting, that he is unregulatable. Whatever personal problems he has that prevents him from checking his mailbox or checking his emails are his, and we don't need to dabble in it and put more burden on the staff.
That
I
makes-
understand your frustration. It just doesn't, it's not just up to the board though to solve all of that.
That makes perfect sense. The regulatable part. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Well, I had a motion for a conference. Did I get a second? I forget.
Second,
Okay, a motion and a second. All those in favor?
I
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Ms. Walmsley, I didn't vote. I couldn't get it off mute fast enough, but I am in favor of it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nair. Dr. Gandhi, did I hit everything on the agenda? I think we did.
You did, Madam Chair.
All right, that will bring us to the end of our scheduled time. And we will adjourn the meeting at 2:58.
Thank you.
have a
Thanks
good
all.
evening.
Thank
Bye.
you.